US President Barack Obama and his Cuban counterpart, Raul Castro, made historic announcements this week to normalize diplomatic relations between the two countries. The United States wants to reopen a US embassy in Havana, as well as ease travel restrictions for Americans visiting Cuba. Here's what both leaders had to say about that deal.
Today, America chooses to cut loose the shackles of the past so as to reach for a better future for the Cuban people, for the American people, for our entire hemisphere, and for the world.
We have agreed on the re-establishment of diplomatic relations. This does not mean that the principal issue has been resolved. The economic, commercial, and financial blockade that provoked enormous human and economic suffering on our country should end.
CCTV America's Nathan King is here with the latest developments. And Nathan, as this announcement sinks in, what are you hearing about how this deal came about?
Well, what's amazing is we didn't hear anything about it until it actually happened. In fact, senior State Department officials who deal with Latin America basically said they were surprised and caught on the hop when the announcement was made. What we are learning from calls from the White House and briefings from other officials is there were essentially two men on the American side who made this happen. After US President Barack Obama was re-elected for a second term, Cuba was given a priority list. And then Ben Rhodes, his former speechwriter who is at the National Security Council, and a man called Ricardo Zuniga, who was at the Cuban interest section of the US and then moved to the National Security Council, started a back channel of communications, traveling on commercial planes, and they met in Canada 9 times with a handful of Cuban officials, as well as, we understand, 2 meetings hosted at the Vatican as well. And remember, this was the time when US President Barack Obama actually shook hands with Raul Castro at the funeral of Nelson Mandela in December 2013. The talks had been underway. They focused very much on the prisoner swap. Remember, Alan Gross had been there for 5 years. The 3 of the Cuban 5 intelligence agents were still here, big heroes in Cuba. But then this other intelligence officer came up. We now know his name, Ronaldo Saraf Trujillo, and he was basically in the cryptology department of the Cuban government, and he basically knew a lot of passwords from Cuban agents based here in the US. He became a bargaining chip as well. He'd been in prison since 1995. So there was a prisoner swap deal, but on the back of it, all these different initiatives that, if we see go through, are going to really transform the diplomatic, but also potentially the economic relationship between the US and Cuba after 53 years of basically having a Cold War stance. It's quite incredible events here in Washington this week, Alan.
So, Nathan, we're hearing lots of rhetoric, lots of criticism, lots of support for this announcement, but what changes for the United States and for Cubans especially?
Well, let's take it economically, first of all. Right away, within a few weeks, Cubans here in the US will be able to send more money back home. About $500 a quarter at the moment. That will go up to $2,000. That could mean $2 billion turning into $8.5 billion in a year. That's huge for a country the size of Cuba with only 11 million people, and as you know, a lot below the poverty line. Then the travel opens up. Basically, the US president cannot lift the embargo. It's a congressional ruling, but he can chip away at it. And there's a whole swathe of areas, including business investment, where people can travel to the island and also invest unlimited amounts of money, and Americans can spend up to $8,000 a year on the island. They can even bring back $100 worth of Cuban cigars. So this is all very new, but it's a lot very quickly as well. And of course, the re-establishment of diplomatic relations after not seeing an ambassador since 1961 is quite incredible. And of course, we'll have a Cuban ambassador here. What's missing, Anand, is what the Cubans are agreeing to as well. We've had a lot from the United States over the last few weeks, so it's going to be very interesting when US officials start traveling to Cuba and negotiating how this is all going to work, which is going to be, we understand, in early January of 2015. Then we should know how big this agreement really will be.